Okay, and your hosts today are AK,
and Ivana.
and today we have invited Laurence Paquette as our guest expert. And Laurence, you're the global head of marketing at Vestas, and you describe yourself as a queer millennial expat leader on a mission to help others find their ways in the modern workplace. And that is a great profile for this show. So I was hoping you could tell us a bit more about yourself before we start.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. So as you said, my name is Laurence or Laurence, depending on how you want to say it. I'm originally from Canada, but I live in Denmark and have been an expat for 17 years now. And I work in a very large company, 30,000 people, where I head marketing. And even though I love where I work and I love what we do, I am struggling to understand how the workplace will adjust to newer generations. So I've made it my mission to make it a little bit less stiff. I work in a very conservative industry that is very male-driven, male-dominated, and most people wear suits, and you have to act and behave a certain way. So I'm a queer millennial expat leader, and I'm trying to make it a little bit easier for everyone to find their place in the corporate world. So that's what I do.
That's awesome. And I'm personally really excited to have you on the show because I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while. And like every time you write a post, I'm like, yes. So it's really exciting for me. I'm like, ooh.
Same.
Thank you both. Thank you. I think there's a lot of things that are do. There's a lot of things we do well in the corporate world, but there's a lot of things we can improve. And also, I think it's important to showcase that people in leadership position and executives don't have it all figured out. We are still trying our best to figure out what we're doing, and we're not the most intelligent people. We just we're at the right place at the right time, and we worked hard to get where we are. So.
Oh, I love that. That is exactly the theme of this entire book. So that's so great. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think Marie does need a little bit of advice on how to navigate in her workplace. So it's awesome to have you here as the guide of the day. Laurence, before we start with all the questions, maybe in your own words, could you recap for our listeners what happens in this piece of the story?
Yes, I'll try my best because a lot happens. So if I forget anything, please you can add it afterwards. But I think the way I look at what happens is basically Marie continues to work with the organization and dives deeper, and then decides, well, after Jenny asks her for help, she decides to really go in and help Jenny with the engineering team. Because there's a lot of issues. There's software issues, there's customer dissatisfaction, there is also employee dissatisfaction, pay disparity, and so on. So she decides to go in and help Jenny. And then many things happen, but it's clear that Marie questions Jenny's leadership approach. And she also questions the leadership style of both Jenny, but also Natalie, the CEO. And all of this leads to Marie pushing for mitigating the pay disparity issue, which was a great intent on her part, but that leads to this mutiny and this uproar of the engineering team, and it leads to Marie basically passing out and going on a short sick leave. And I think that's the main part of what happens. And then, of course, there's two other parts to that afterwards. First, she meets during her weekend with the UX person who left the company, Jason, and asks him if he wants to return. And then she also contacts her boss, Mark. Well, actually, she first talks to Jacques, wasn't it Jacques? Yes, I believe it's Jacques, in charge of sales, and then talks to Mark and talks to Natalie and tries to come back to work a little bit faster than Mark wanted to. And it's clear at the end that Mark is really trying to protect her, not undermine her, but protect her. That would be my very short summary of what happened.
I think that's a great summary. That's actually getting all the dynamics in there in one go. That's great. So when you were reading this, was there any dynamics or methodologies or theories that kind of jumped out of you that you wanted to apply to the situation?
Yeah, there were, but actually, and the way when I was reading it, first I read it and then I read it the second time just to make sure that I would also take some notes. I think before I answered that question specifically, I think that when I read it, I saw that the narrative was touching on different themes, right? There's workplace dynamics, there's leadership and management issues, there's software development challenges, and there's also a lot about personal relationships, right? So there's a lot of different layers and a lot of different aspects to the story that we can dive into. But if we go more to your question, and I think for me reading through this, it's clear that the first thing that jumped to me was the leadership issues that they're facing. A lot of leadership issues at all level, at the CEO level, at all the CEO's direct reports seem to have some level of leadership issues. And then there's also Marie, who's not necessarily leading the engineer, but she becomes the symbol of leadership and of hope. So there's a lot of leadership to unpack in here. And when I was reading it, I was thinking, there's a lot of theories that can be applied to this, right? There's transformational leadership theory, there's servant leadership theory. Now, I'm not going to explain all of them, I'm just going to name a few. There's more like conflict resolution and communication models that can be applied. There could be also team building or trust building exercises and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things that can be applied and can be done, but I'm not a huge fan of the theoretical models because I find them often too structured for dynamic environments where people are interacting with one another. So I was thinking a lot about what I would do if I was Marie. That was mainly if I was Marie, what would I do? And I think for me, she's facing so many issues separately that I think the first thing that if I were Marie, I would do is find some allies internally. And it seems at the end that she's starting to find some, but I think she needs to proactively make allies first and foremost, because she won't be able to do this on her own. And she should be a lot more proactive about allyship building.
I think that's a really good point. Sorry, Ivana.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that is a great point. And I do think that previously we've seen some of Marie's colleagues from her team kind of offer help, but Marie has never actively tried to build like a support team around her. It's more been them reaching out to her. So I think it's a really good point that would be a great idea to do, so she's not alone and actually has a team around her to support this journey.
Yeah, and I think that is like spot on for what is happening here. And I was thinking about Marie's background, which may not be relevant in this story part, but she used to be a consultant before. She was a management consultant who would go in and solve a problem and go out again. And this is her first position where she's actually in a leadership role. And as a consultant, it's a little bit different trying to solve a problem rather than being in a company, being in an ecosystem. But also there's an aspect of if you have an organization, we have a formal way of how things should work, and building allyship around a cause is a little bit outside of the lines. So my question to you, Laurence, is shouldn't it be sufficient to follow the corporate governance, or to which degree do we need to kind of find that support outside of the formal structure?
Yeah, that's a good and that's a fair question. I think in theory the corporate structure should be enough, but I have not worked yet in a place where it was, because at the end of the day we just work with people, right? And so and people, although respect rules, people gravitate towards one another, right? So people build relationship and networks and allyship, and that usually takes over the model and the governance in most cases. So I think even though corporate structure should be enough, it's usually not enough. And I think that most people that are successful in leadership and in change management will have a good strategic, political, and stakeholder management flair. Because if you don't have that ability of understanding the politics and the stakeholders and who knows who and who talks to whom about what, I know it sounds like gossip, but people are people, even in large businesses or in smaller ones too. If you don't have a good understanding of that, it's much harder to navigate the corporate environment or the business environment in general. And it's clear when you read Marie that she really does behave like a ex-consultant, where you're just thrown in and you will just do your job, and because you have the mandate, then all doors should open up based on mandate. And that works well for consultants. They are able to impose that usually. I've seen it many times. But I don't think that people who work internally, like internally employed people, don't have that ability, even if they have the mandate. It's not as easy. And therefore, strategic stakeholder management is key.
Absolutely agree. I kind of want to dive deeper into the story itself. So we have the situation with the pay disparity. And you mentioned that Marie tries to address it, and it's with the best of intentions. But if you were Marie in this situation, would you have handled it differently?
So the pay disparity is a huge issue, and it needs to be solved, 100%. Now, how to communicate that it has been solved and how to talk about it is probably what I would have done differently. So I'm not in favor of people taking pay cuts either, because I find that it's not a great signal to the organization. So I think I would have probably found a midway and figure out, I know the company is having financial issues, so it might be difficult, but there's finding the right balance of pay cut plus increase. And then I would not have informed everyone in plenum as it was done. I don't think there's any good way to do this, to inform everyone, but I would have probably been little bit more strategic. Because Jenny has such a poor relationship with her team, I don't think that was the right way. I think the first step would have been for Jenny to build relationship one-on-one with each of her direct reports and everyone in the engineering team, to build some trust. And then once that trust is built, maybe after a week or so, not too long, then talk about that change, because then it would be Jenny building trust and then showcasing her willingness to listen and hear the team by solving the pay disparity issue. So use that as a strategic way of showcasing her good intent. Jenny, not Marie, Jenny. And so I think it was a missed opportunity on Jenny's part not to see that she can fix it today, but she should not talk about it until she's showcased where she wants to go in her intent with her team, and then she can use that in her favor afterwards.
I think that's an excellent point. And I'm also curious about Jenny's role in this in general, because what we know about Jenny is that she used to be a developer herself, and then she got promoted through, you can say, the engineering ranks to a manager, and now she's the VP of engineering. And at least in this company, she's having a hard time figuring out, well, how do I make an engineering department run? And I was curious if you've ever met a Jenny type in your work life, and how could she become a better leader?
Yeah, I've met many specialists to become people leader, right? And some of them manage to transition very well, but in my experience, all of them struggle with two things. First, letting go of owning what they're working on. And secondly, understanding that each individual in the team will have different goals or drivers for motivation, and how to make all of that work in an ecosystem that really adds value. I think it's clear Jenny has given up a little bit. Maybe it's due to the lack of tool and support. It doesn't seem that overall Zebra Apps is the most psychologically safe environment to work in, or the best. It doesn't seem like there's a great support system either. So I think she's given up. But I do think the fact that she opens up to Marie and is showcases vulnerability is a sign of help, right? She's asking for help and support. So that means there's actually room to make drastic changes, because there is no better time to do those changes than when someone asks for help. I'm not sure I understood your question, actually. Did I?
I think you did, because my
Okay.
question was more, well, what could she do? And you just said that opening up, asking for help, and then taking it from there is a great first step.
Yes. I also think everybody's so miserable in this company. I'm very surprised they don't talk more to each other, because being so miserable and the culture being so difficult to work with, it almost feels like there is so much potential to change everything at once and do a proper intervention on the whole business, because everybody agrees that it's not working.
Yeah, and there's this level of fear or dysfunction that hangs like a cloud over Zebra Apps.
Yes, psychological safety is non-existent, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you really had some good points there around promoting specialists, and I can just wanted to share like a personal reflection that I used to be a specialist and was promoted into leadership, and I can 100% relate to what you said, especially about the hard part is really to let go of the details of what you're working on, and having that control of what's going on, because you need to delegate. And I think that was at least really hard for me, so I totally relate to that. So I think it's a very human, or like what Jen is experiencing is, as you say, quite common probably for that type of position. And I also think this is the first time in the story, or at least one of few times where we actually, Marie has a few breakthroughs in this section, and Jenny opening up and asking for help is one of them.
I have another question that is about, well, Jenny being a female engineering leader, which is still relatively rare. How much of the rift between her and the engineering team may be due to her unusual gender in this role?
It's a very good question, and it's a fair one. It could have a big impact. It could be that her team doesn't believe in her and her abilities, for sure. It could also be that she doesn't know how to be a leader without being very masculine about it. It also seems that Natalie is the same, extremely masculine in her ways. So maybe Jenny also struggles to find how to lead with integrity without having to adopt something that is not her own, right? So that's definitely something that I read through when I was reading, because she also mentions Natalie's masculine style of leadership. So I do think that Jenny is also seeking different types of role models, not necessarily based on gender, just different ways of approaching leadership that would be beneficial for her, so she can find what's best for her and her style.
And there I personally relate, because for the longest time, when I became a leader myself, I thought that I would kind of magically transform into this leader persona. And for me, it kept coming as a surprise that, wait a minute, I was still me. And I had a hard time like convincing myself maybe that it was okay just to stay me and be a leader in that way, which is, we don't know each other very well, but I'm super goofy. And that's kind of part of my style. And you can also be a goofy leader and be effective.
I can totally relate to what you said. When I became a leader a few years back, or at least I got my first small team of 2 people to start with, I really thought I had to be hyper serious. And I'm a very hyper friendly person who talks about everything. And I really get quite personal with everyone. I just don't see the difference between work and personal life much. So I just get very personal. But when I took on that job, I completely changed and became extremely rigid and cold. And I tried for 3 months, and it was a horrible 3 months. I did not enjoy it. I lost one of the two employees. They left. So, and I was really trying to be a leader with a personality that was completely different. And it took me quite a while to realize that I could actually assert credibility and authority while being also very friendly and fun. And that's also because, like Jenny or like you, I haven't seen many role models of that. Most of the leaders that preceded me have been suited men who did not talk much about their personal life and did not share much. And so I felt that I had to do that. And it's been great not to do it. I'm a
Mm.
much better leader just being me. And I think it's important that people can find a way to lead without having to be in a certain mold.
Mm.
That's also where the generation part comes in. I think, as you talked about, I don't think that, at least when my daughters enter the workplace, I actually don't want them to have to fit into a mold. I want them to be able to be who they are and bring that to their workplace.
Exactly. And I think it will change. I think it will change for zebra apps, but I think it will change also in the real world. Probably slower in the real world than in zebra apps. Actually, I think we probably need a few more years and a larger proportion of younger people actually imposing this, because we're not there yet. There's still like conventions that need to be respected, and I can still see people that play the game, that wear the suits, that do the right thing, that did the consultancy first, then wear their suits, come into work, and do all the right things, get promoted way faster. Not necessarily for their results, but just because they play the game the right way, and that game has to change, and it will.
I think in this piece of the story, we also read about their CFO search.
Yes.
And this is another area where they're kind of they're meeting all these suit people and not quite finding the right match. And I think, at least in my experience, a lot of kind of CFO candidates have had that traditional career. And how would you find a CFO that's not a standard suit person?
I would look at other startups. I would just look at other SaaS companies and startups, and I know the company is not the greatest place, but find someone that's willing to might be not as qualified, but then has the right personality and experience, and then bet that they can learn on the job. So I would look for the fit in terms of what kind of leadership and what kind of cultural influence we want to impose compared to years of experience. Of course, the person needs to be qualified. It's still a CFO job, but
Yeah.
maybe lowering down the qualification requirements and choosing someone that's a better fit. And that can influence the CEO, because usually CFOs tend to influence highly CEOs, and that seems to be heavily needed in this case.
And this is interesting because this actually happened. I just recently came back from maternity leave, and I was in this group of moms during that leave. And one of the other really cool women in that group, she actually got headhunted for a CFO position while she was on leave. And she didn't have any, like, that would be her first job in that kind of place in the hierarchy. And I think the company who headhunted just wanted her for the cultural fit, and they believed that she could grow into that role. So I think there's hope. Just to share a positive story.
Yeah, I know a couple people that have done that. They worked in a different thing, or they worked in strategy or merger and acquisition, and then they were suddenly recruited in a smaller company as their CFO, because they were looking for a young female, especially leader. So exactly. Not that not in the case of zebra apps, I'm not sure the gender matters at all, but just a different type of leadership and and personality. So it's a good fit, and it can help and potentially role model for some of the others how to lead their teams.
I kind of want to go into the room where this salary disparity announcement is shared, and where water bottles start getting thrown at Marie and Jenny. Laurence, if that was you in that room, what would you have done if you were on stage?
Well, when I read it, I have to admit that I had to go back and read it again, because I was just thinking to myself, like, is it possible that people would actually throw things being so angry? And yeah, that can happen. I just hope never to be in a place where that is happening. I think this is a very complex situation, because first of all, no one should throw anything. It's actually dangerous, right? Physically, from a safety standpoint, this is not okay. So if it had been me, I would have actually walked out as the person on stage. I would have walked out and said, no matter your dissatisfaction, we are not tolerating this behavior. And I would have called in the management team and potentially the board of the company, just to say, like, this is where we are right now, because we need to have a meeting with the engineering team where they understand two things: is that, yes, we hear you, that you're frustrated and you're not happy, and we are going to do something about it. But two, no matter the level of frustration, physical harassment is not a behavior we allow. And that's my main issue, is that no matter how dissatisfied one can be, physical harassment should not be tolerated. So I think they were caught off guard, but I don't think the reaction was, well, fainting is not a reaction, right? It's just something that happened. But I do think that there needs to be a much more authoritative step taken here to tell the team that, yes, they are being heard, but no, this won't be accepted. And that if it happens again, people will be dismissed. It can't be tolerated. The same with the sugar packet stuff that happened previously. Like, any kind of rebellion to that extent should be, this requires an intervention where we both say, we hear you, we see you, but we don't tolerate such behavior.
Yeah, that is a really good point, because what happened with the sugar incident, Marie was quite set on not punishing Willie, who did it, but actually, helping out with the salary disparity situation instead. So she was like, he will get justice, but more in a good way. And maybe that kind of backfired, because there was no consequence for that. And now this is where they are, because people just continue to act out in these very aggressive ways. So that is a good point about actually taking a
Well,
step.
they've set a precedent now that it's okay to rebel and to do bad things. There might not be any punishment. And not that I'm in favor of punishment, but this is a company, right? These are adults. And if it was children in a schoolyard, you would actually have consequences, right? You would be told you're not allowed, and now you have to, here are the consequences. Yeah, basically. And I feel like as a company, this needs to be addressed. And it probably needs to be addressed like as a general team meeting. Like, the whole company probably needs to be seated down in one room, everyone, and a proper meeting needs to take place to address the rebellion, and also say, this is what we've heard, this is what we know is not working, and now this is what we're going to do. And we're going to need your help to do it. And we're going to ask for feedback, and we're going to ask you to get involved and be accountable. But I feel they're at the point where the company needs to do a meeting with everyone, where Natalie has to do what a leader should do and take the stage and give guidance to everyone.
I think that's a good point. And what happens shortly after the water bottles come flying is, as we know, that Marie faints, and Jenny kind of disappears. So Marie is left alone with the angry engineer mob, and now standing in a circle around her. I guess my first question here would be, is Marie weak for fainting?
I think that you can't judge people for their physical. I mean, anyone could faint. First of all, she seems to not have eaten lunch, and she seems to have problems with eating in general, to be honest. So no, absolutely not. And I can't judge someone for their physical and emotional reaction, such an uprising, because I don't know her past, right? This could also remind her of something that happened in the past and be a trigger for her in all sorts of ways, right? So absolutely not. It's a shame that she fainted, because she might also feel weak for it, and that's more what's the issue, right? It's more about her feeling weak. She shouldn't feel weak for it, and no one should consider her weak for it.
Yeah, I also kind of want to double click on her trouble with eating in general. What do you make of her trouble with eating, and how does it relate to the state of zebra apps?
Well, I don't, I don't want to overly dive into Marie's potential eating disorder, but it seems like she's having a lack of control at work. So she's controlling her food, or pretends she forgets, or just like either she's really not into a person who doesn't eat. So therefore, if she's not reminded, she doesn't eat because she has no headspace to remember to eat, or she's not eating for control. One or the other.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, I just noted down before that we had this topic up before, but it's really interesting how the conflict avoidance in general, now you're saying that they should actually take an active stance against these kind of rebellions. I think conflict avoidance in general in zebra apps is a big problem, and I think that's also why the employees are getting so frustrated, and they're just like seeking a response and not really getting it. But I do think that it turned out actually as a help. Not, of course, it wasn't good that she fainted, but I think that situation made the crowd kind of calm down and come and talk to her, and actually some of the engineers opened up. So at least that was a good effect.
Yeah, she became an ally by fainting, which is an interesting turn of events. It's good for her and to her advantage. I just hope Marisa is clever enough to see it, to use it to her advantage, because so far what I think is that Marie's still waiting for overall guidance, and she's really trying to navigate this organization. And I do think that her consultancy background is getting in the way of her understanding how to play her role. And also Jason mentions it, the UX person, that she's kind of like the savior, or the upcoming savior. Mark is trying to protect her, so she seems that her own self-awareness of who she is, being who she's no, let me rephrase that. It seems that her own self-awareness of how other people perceive her and her role in the company is not a match. So she doesn't see it. And I think she needs to spend a bit of time reflecting on that. Because if she is perceived as the savior, and if everyone thinks she has this ability, then she should play on those cards, and she should do it fast, because her window will not stay open for a very long time.
That's an interesting point also, that sometimes the way that people see you and the kind of space that you're given by the team may be different than the idea you had about which space you intended to occupy.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation? Do you roll with what you're given, or do you try to impose your own vision?
I say, well, it might also be uncomfortable, right? To be given a position that you did not expect, or a role that you did not expect, that is also not in your comfort zone. If I was Marie, if I were Marie, I would actually sit down and reflect quickly on the risks and the rewards of taking on that role that people seem to want her to take, right? And I would do a quick calculation, because there are risks, right? Natalie might not be happy with this. Mark might not be happy with this. There are risks, but the reward could be that she might also be able to fix more things than anyone expected in the first place, and be able then to prove her worth, and if she's ambitious, this can boost her career also. So if I were her, I would quickly assess risks and rewards. And personally, if I were Marie, it seems like such a horrible place to work. I feel like she has nothing to lose. Status quo seems like the worst outcome. So why not go all in? Otherwise, she should find another job. Like,
Yeah.
this doesn't seem like a very good place to be.
And that's also an interesting observation in the sense that Jason, who already left the company, is now coming back to this dysfunctional place that he left. Why do you think that is?
It's a good question. When I was reading it, I was like, I don't understand the motives here. I do. Maybe it's because I don't fully understand Marie and the charisma and the appeal that she has. So for me, I was reading it and I was thinking like either where he went now is not great either. And then he realizes that he might have better influence and opportunities if he goes back to Zebra. Or maybe it's because he really believes that Marie can do a turnaround and that they can shape Zebra into the company that they want it to be.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting at this point in the story, because in the beginning, Marie focused a lot on relaunching these company values and trying to like really speak to the values to get people to stay. And right now at this point, it seems like it's almost Marie herself who's attracting, Jason to come back, for instance, and not so much the values, but maybe she's like, yeah, being the image of the values right now. Which is also interesting because she's not always, I think, living up to to them either. But yeah, it's certainly a twist that Jason is now thinking of joining again.
And she should do everything she can to make sure that he gets hired immediately, because then she also, by having him hired immediately, she's also sending a strong signal to everyone in the company that she has managed to get the UX person back, and that person will come and fix a lot of the issues they're facing with the software right now. So it will improve customer satisfaction. So she also positioned herself as someone who can actually make changes and make things happen, right? So her credibility will increase drastically. And I think that after that, her main issue will be not Mark. It's she needs to talk to Natalie directly.
And would that be okay to skip her level and speak directly to the person with actual influence?
Well, she already did it, and it's clear that Mark wasn't happy. So I think if I were her, I would actually sit down with Mark and explain why she needs to talk to Natalie. Mark can come along. Like he can be in the room, but it's more that Natalie needs to understand that this company is not going to survive or continue or thrive unless there's a actual change in how the company is ran and there's actual cultural changes happening. And I think Natalie needs, and those changes need to be top down. There needs to be an endorsement and sponsorship from the top. Doesn't mean Natalie has to do everything. I mean, Marie can be the main driver, but Natalie needs to endorse and agree to the changes.
I'm also thinking about the role that Jacques plays here, who is the VP of sales, but is very much invested in fixing the quality issues of the software. What do you think about a person who should be focused on selling, being interested in the actual product?
Well, I think it makes sense that he reached out. And I mean, if the product is of poor quality, he can't sell. So, I mean, he's not reaching out to fix the company. He's reaching out so he can continue to sell, meaning, which is his job. So that's fine. And right now he needs the product to be fixed so he can sell. But for the product to be fixed, the company needs to be fixed too a little bit. So Marie has all the ingredients to make Jacques an ally and make Jacques also a potential influencer or someone who can speak to Natalie even before she does, right? He seems much closer to Natalie, and also reports to her, so she can use Jacques to start seeding some ideas in Natalie so that when she goes to and speaks to her, some of these ideas have already been seeded and have had time to grow a little bit. So I do think that I do think that it's time for Marie to realize she's playing a game of chess and she needs to think more than one move at the time, but probably 5, 6 ahead.
I have a question in terms of this situation. This Sunday, she's having brunch with Jason, and then she takes all these work calls. Do you think it's fine that all of this is happening on a Sunday, where it's actually the weekend?
No. Well, first, she shouldn't have brunch on a Sunday. I had to, well, she could, but not with the previous employee. I mean, that is a little bit in between the lines. It was unclear why she would have to do that because she's on sick leave anyway. She could have had a coffee on a normal day. So that part, I mean, she can do what she wants on a Sunday with a previous employee. That I wouldn't do it, but she can. But the rest and all the calls, I mean, I don't see why Jacques had to call and why it had to all happen on a Sunday. I find that very invasive and a very poor signal of work-life balance and company values. If something like if the software was, if there was a cybersecurity attack, then I agree. Then any day, anytime. If someone is injured, like there are life and death situation, there are crisis situation, but there's no crisis here. So I just thought that was poor judgment on everyone's part.
And there is this funny dynamic where they're all calling each other more or less at the same time, as if they're sitting waiting for each other's calls this Sunday morning.
Yes, and it feels like this is part of the culture of the company. Like no one talks to, like we don't talk as a group. We all do play the messenger, and that's where they need to have a proper management team sit down. You know, let's talk about what's going on and not play messenger because that's a very dangerous game to play.
I want to dive into the last bit, which is Marie talking to Mark. And throughout the whole story, it's unclear where Mark is at. What is he trying to do? His feelings are hurt a lot. But here, it seems like he actually is looking out for Marie. And my question to you is that part of a leader's job is to take, you can say, personally care of your employees?
It is, and it's good to protect them and to be the gatekeeper. But I have to say, I'm not sure that's 100% what Mark is doing because he also went around her back. He also doesn't always communicate so well, doesn't tell her everything. So I think he sounds like he's now taking care of her, but I would like to challenge to its extent that is because he suddenly realized the importance and the influence she has in the company, influence he doesn't have. So, and if that's the case, then that he suddenly realized how much influence she has. Now he's trying to protect her, which is diminishing her role and a little bit patronizing, to be honest. And that's how I read it. I didn't read it as a great gesture of care. I read it more like, oh, I've realized now how influential you are, so I'm going to make sure I'm on top of you. So I'm not sure. And maybe I'm giving really the wrong intent to Mark, and if I am, I apologize to him, but that's how I read the last part because it was suddenly very out of character, it felt.
And that is kind of the insecurity we have all the time, where it's unclear what is he trying to do exactly, and is it for Marie's benefit or not?
I mean, I could look at it the other way. Maybe he's just been very poor in his ways of behaving and communicating, and he meant only good and to only care for Marie the whole time. It just did not really come across as that so far until this very bit. And if that's what he intended the whole time, then he really needs to have a bit of coaching on how to better showcase care and manage employees, because it does appear as a sudden realization that he's losing power, and therefore he's gonna muffle it a little bit so that he's still in charge. Also, I'm sorry, I also have to say his reaction to Marie, like, I don't remember the sentence, Marie talking to Natalie first. The way that sentence or how he says it to her doesn't show care to me, because if it was actual real care and if it happened to me, I would say, like, hey, I've heard that you just called my boss. Why didn't you call me first? Like, what's standing in the way of us? Like, can you explain? Because I'm wondering, like, what did I do wrong that it made you feel like you should go over me? But that's not what he says. It's an accusation, right? So I don't think he's taking care of her at all. I think he's just he feels threatened by his own employee.
Yeah, and we've had this Mark-Marie dynamic. It's been very turbulent since the beginning. And I also think that Marie, in the beginning of the story, she got this red hot ball of lava in her stomach every time Mark did or said something. And I think that's kind of loosening up now, but I also agree that we still don't really understand Mark's motives here. So yeah, I think all these different power dynamics are in play, and it will be interesting to see also if Marie will take up a bigger role in fixing Jenny's problem in the engineering department, where that will leave Mark. And in general, like, I'm also wondering what about the other departments at C-Perhaps? Are they equally dysfunctional, or is this really the core of the problem here? But maybe we'll see.
And that's maybe a great segue to the next question, Laurence, is what do you think and hope happens next in the story?
Well, personally, I hope Marie rises to the occasion and takes on the challenge. I actually hope she goes all in and go even beyond her own scope of work to fix this. I'm not sure she's ready as a person, or she has reflected upon how to do this enough, but I do hope that she tries. And I hope that Jason comes back and that she makes as many allies as she can. But I have some doubts that she'll succeed, because I'm not sure her self-awareness is good enough yet. That's how I see it.
That's a great way to summarize that.
Yes.
Should we start to wrap up?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So before we ask the final question, I just wanted to mention first, if anyone's been wondering why my name is Kenneth today, it's just because I'm not on my own computer, but have borrowed my husband's. So that is the explanation. And then I also just wanted to say that this will be the last episode we will record in while Ivana and I are both in Denmark, because later this week, Ivana will be moving to the US.
It'll be a different background behind me next time.
Yeah. Okay, but before we end, Laurence, if our listeners would like to learn more about you or ask you anything, is there any way to see more or contact you?
Yeah, for sure. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Ivana mentioned it earlier. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I also have a website, which is just myname.com. So that's also easy. I'm also active on Instagram, TikTok, and any other social media. So if you just Google my name, you'll find me very quickly, to be honest. And I'm always willing to talk to anyone. Coffee, conversations online. I find I find it always interesting to exchange with different people. I always learn something talking to new people. So if you're interested, just reach out anytime.
I might take you out on that.
Okay, you do that.
Thank you.
Well, otherwise, thank you so much for having this conversation with us, Laurence. I at least learned a lot about Marie's situation and how she could navigate here. A couple of things for me to think about in my own leadership. So thank you so much for talking us through this part of the book.
You're very welcome, and thank you for inviting me. This was really fun.
Thank you.